Welcome to Medical Imaging Matters, a podcast from AHRA, the Association for Medical Imaging Management. I am Jason Newmark, the Executive Director of AHRA and your host. Today's episode will be focused on innovation, not as a one-time initiative, but as a commitment to staying proactive, learning from your experiences, and continuously transforming the way we lead and operate. As everyone will agree, innovation requires intention. You must involve your team members. You have to engage with referring providers and vendor partners. Oftentimes, you collaborate across service lines. And many more times, you look well beyond just medical imaging or healthcare for fresh ideas, new ideas about proven best practices. But it also requires discipline, owning your time rather than letting constant firefighting dictate your day. With that done, you can shift from simply reacting to challenges to actively driving change. To explore what all this looks like in practice, I'm joined by Michael McGuire, the Director of Strategic Growth and Innovations at Beekley Medical. Michael shares Beekley's long-standing history of innovation, how their offerings have evolved based on real-world feedback and customer needs, and why true partnerships, not just transactional relationships, are critical to meaningful innovation. We also discuss how innovative approaches can positively impact safety, quality, staff engagement, operational efficiency, and return on investment. So whether you're an imaging leader, a frontline team member, or a partner invested in the future of medical imaging, this discussion offers practical insights and perspectives that you can apply right away. Let's get started. All right. Hello, Mike. I'm so excited to start my day off with you today. I admit I'd rather have the two of us out on the golf course because looking out my window and finally seeing spring here and the greenery and the joys of working at home, I can look out my window and see that sometimes. But we're not at the golf course. We can pretend we're there, but I'm super excited to have you here today to talk about innovation and the things that are going on in your world, industry overall. But as we get started, let's make sure that people know who you are. So you want to give a little background and share with the listeners who you are?
Absolutely. So happy to be here with you today, too. Very excited for our conversation. I'm Mike McGuire. I'm our Director of Strategic Growth and Innovation at Beekley Medical. I'm primarily responsible for managing product development and our national accounts team. So I work with inventors all across the healthcare continuum, from technologists to nurses to doctors to surgeons. And ultimately, we partner with them to bring their ideas for medical devices to life, from simple concepts to proof of concept, through prototyping, FDA and regulatory channels, and then commercialization and national launch, which we would sell through our sales team.
I love that, right? I have to ask, now I'm just more curious, how did you get into that? How did you end up in a role like that where you get to be so creative and around people just come up with new ideas? It sounds fascinating. I think people are always asking career paths and different things. I'm so curious. How'd that get into that role? How long you been there? Yeah.
It's a great question. So I've been at Beekley 11 years, and I started at Beekley actually as a medical device sales rep. And truthfully, I think, coming from a point of innovation, I think that's a great place to start. Because ultimately, if you're going to innovate something, it has to be useful in healthcare. It has to have a purpose. It has to have a strong value proposition. And I think if you start your career early selling medical devices, you learn very quickly the type of messaging that's required, the type of products that people are interested in, how to position those products, what's really going to move the needle in healthcare, what's going to make a difference for a provider, what's going to make a difference for a patient. And I think at Beekley, ultimately, what we'd like to do is we like to say, we don't want to work on anything that's not going to make the world a better place. So when we always like to take a step back and really look at the innovations that are coming into our pipeline, the ones we're actively working on, and say, are we making a difference in the world with the time and energy we're spending on this? So for me, the career path really was starting out in sales. From sales, I moved into national accounts, became very familiar with contracting, deal structure, all of that fun stuff. And then from there, I was always very creative, and I would always, look at what was going on in the market and say, we could do this. We should try to, make a product, that solves this potential problem. Where I'd be talking to somebody on a sales call and they would bring up some, struggle in their day. And I'm like, we might be able to solve that problem for you. So one thing led to another. And before I knew it, I was, managing all of product development for Beekley.
I love that. There's so many little pearls you brought up there. And I think, just real quick, some of the things that I jumped out. I love that you're asking sort of what are your challenges? So part of what we always talk about with our vendors when I was back in the hospital every day was, yes, you have a product or a service to sell to me, but I don't know if I need that yet. But I like when you're asking what my challenges are, what am I dealing with? Because one, to your idea, you can get innovative. Maybe you can create something or we do something together that could solve the problem. Or two, sounds like, in the sales world, you get to bounce around and get to see so many different places to say, hey, Jason, you know what? The issue you brought up, trust me, you're not the only one. And I got 4 other people that solved it, or 4 other people I'm going to put you in touch with to have a dialogue with. Maybe we all solve it together, right? Sort of like the backbone to that.
Absolutely. And I think that's the beauty, I think, in kind of what we do at Beekley, right? Is so many of the products that we've innovated and turned into professional medical devices came from ideas where we observed makeshift. So, and people in healthcare, they are very innovative in and of themselves, it's like almost some people, it's like watching MacGyver sometimes where, people are taping things together and using other things just to get a job done. And, it's complicated and it takes time out of their day, and again, it's not a professional medical device. It's a workaround. So a lot of the products we've created really have stemmed from us either observing or healthcare providers coming to us and saying like, I'm really sick of taping this contraption together and having to make this every time this procedure comes up. Is there something better we can do? And again, that's where I think we're making that difference, right? We're saying like, well, if we can help that provider save time, give them something more professional to use on their patient that is a medical device, we're making a difference in the world.
Yeah. So on that, maybe I'm trying to think of like, the history of your innovation and sort of how Bayer got started in this realm. You sort of hit on it a little bit. So your experience is sort of, you talk about how you saw those things and you found opportunities to ask people what their challenges were, how can you help? Is that sort of a core across the company? Is it sort of encouraged? Like I'm trying to get to the behind the scenes a little bit of how Beekley thinks from a corporation of how the history of them really getting involved in this. And because it's not saying other companies don't do that, but this is very different. It's very interesting to hear this side of the world.
Yeah, that's, that really is such a cool story and that's deeply rooted, I think, in the history of Beekley. So we're a 92-year-old company. We started in 1934 as a printing company. And for me, I think one of the most special things about Beekley is, and this is paramount to any company in my belief, is that you have to be able to transform, right? We look back at companies that failed to transform, big, great companies, right? Like Kodak, Kodak, household name for years, right? Younger generations probably don't even know what Kodak is today, and that's sad because they were a great company, but they missed the mark on transforming from film to digital, and by the time
Paul Simon song had Kodachrome in it, sort of Kodak.
Right? Yeah, exactly. And maybe think of Blockbuster Video, right? I mean, Blockbuster Video, awesome brand, recognized across the world. You still hear in nostalgia, everyone talks about Blockbuster, but Netflix came to Blockbuster and said, hey, we'd like you to buy us. And they kind of, laughed at that, and look what happened. They were obsoleted by streaming platforms,
Great movie, by the way, The Last Blockbuster. I think it might actually be on Netflix, which is actually pretty funny.
It is. The one it's in Oregon. Yeah. I think it's out there. It's out there in Oregon. Yeah.
Amazing.
It is.
I have nostalgia for it because I used to love roaming the halls there, but you were absolutely right? It was right there in front of them and they just missed it.
They missed it, and I think that's where if you get complacent and you get stuck in just what you do every day, you have to be willing to transform. And I think that's where sometimes we see great companies begin to fail when they rest on their laurels and they're not willing to transform. And I think that really takes some strategy, because I think you can't just go from, A to Z. You've got to look at where you are today and say, how can we transform to B or D? But what's going to bridge that gap? And that's really your transformation gap. And as long as your organization or your business has the core capabilities to transform, you can absolutely reinvent the business. And that's what Beekley did. So we were a printing company in 1934. Early 60s came around. Mason Beekley took over as the CEO of the company. And so we're going to get a little more specialized. We're not just going to be a printing company. We're going to specialize in printing medical documents for hospitals. And very quickly, QuickChart really became the most well-known lab intake form, and for lab results. So, that Beekley, again, already a very well-recognized brand in the 60s. And, everyone was using QuickChart. That's who they came to for that documentation. However, he was definitely a visionary. And when the 80s started to roll around, he was like, geez, this thing called computers is coming into play, and this may hurt our print business. So he transformed the company. And in about 84, we started our first medical grade skin marker. And that was really the beginning of Beekley becoming a medical device company. And the reason that Mason wanted to do that is he understood that what they were using for radiology skin markers were completely makeshift. People were going to the gun shop, they were buying buckshot, they were taping that to people's chests, they were buying linear garden wire if they needed a linear marker, they were clipping linear garden wire, taping that to people, and it was rather barbaric, it wasn't professional, and we were like, we could create something that absolutely was a professional medical device. So we created the X-Spot in '84. It became widely adopted, as really the go-to for, marking an area of concern during radiology. From there, Beekley just continued to innovate. And that is really where I think we became really over time very well known for creating the 5-shape skin marking system for mammography. So we created 5 different skin markers that would go on the breast during a mammogram, a BB to indicate where the nipple is, a circle to indicate where a mole is. Moles are commonly mistaken as cancers, linear line for a post-surgical scar, the triangle international sign of warning for a palpable mass, and a square for focal pain. And that really helped radiologists and technologists communicate together because the technologist places the marker, the radiologist is reading it. It's like the radiologist sees a circle. He's like, okay, that's a mole. I don't need to, I know what it is. It's not a cancer. I can move on from there. He sees a triangle and he's like, okay, I need to spend a lot of time really looking at that area because they feel something and there's something palpable there. Same thing with the square focal pain. You're like, okay, we don't feel anything, but there's pain there for a reason. We need to pay attention to that area. And then the post-surgical scars, especially in like Tomo today, there's a lot of speculation that can come from a post-surgical scar, which could also mimic cancer. So that is also very important that, we mark, linear as well. And then the nipple, absolutely, if you're trying to get a good measurement from the P&L line, marking the nipple is very helpful. And especially if it rolls under. If that nipple does roll under during a mammogram, that can also mimic a cancer. So it alleviated a lot of questions. It made read time much smoother for the radiologist. And it was adopted, certainly nationally and now even internationally. That 5-shape system is recognized across the world.
Yeah.
And then from there, we continued to innovate. And we said, we can there's lots of other modalities that need skin markers. So we innovated into CT. We created markers for 3-point setups or 5-point setups in radiation therapy. We created markers for proprietary ingredient that images in every sequence in MRI. We've created very interesting beverages that replace contrast solutions. So we've taken the pharmaceuticals out of those, and we have given a beverage that has improved their comparable image quality. It's also very palatable, so it doesn't taste so bad. A lot of these folks coming in for these type of exams maybe aren't feeling so good, so they need something palatable to get into to ingest. Breast biopsy products, receptor plate coverlets, and most recently, one of our fastest growing product lines now actually is Eliquil, which is a clinical aromatherapy line. Right. And really, it's not necessarily a new product. That is probably about 12 years old now. We were a little ahead of the curve on that. But recently, I think we've reached a point in time where we're seeing wellness and healthcare start to converge. And I think more holistic options are being accepted into healthcare and recognize that there is a benefit to doing this. So Eliquil has been great because, JACO's come into hospitals and has said you need one non-pharmacological approach to opioids. It's a great first step. We have great studies that show how using Eliquil as a first step, it helps reduce the amount of opioids the facility is using. Not everyone needs an opioid. There certainly are people that are going to be in such extreme pain that they will need that. But but to try something holistic first, like Eliquil as a go-to is a great way to do it. It's very popular in pre-op and post-op because pre-op, same type of thing. Most people are nervous during a surgery, right? Like no one comes in like overjoyed to have a surgery today. Usually you're a little nervous about it, but not everybody needs a benzo. You might be able to give somebody an Eliquil. That's going to calm them down enough and get them into the procedure. And then you will have people that are highly anxious and they probably maybe do need a benzo. But again, it's like a good first step measure. Same thing in post-op. It's like you come out of surgery, you're a little bit queasy, you're lethargic. Not everybody needs a Zofran. You might be able to use like our orange peppermint or our orange ginger, which is going to knock down some of that queasiness, maybe uplift the patient a little bit, just get them a little bit livelier, and they're good to go. It's it's a really nice tool for reducing the amount of pharmaceuticals that are used.
Well, it's funny you bring that up. So like that's a perfect example. I think it was when you were talking about transformation and looking a way to innovate, and you just explained a lot of the different products, which is, I know we're not salesy on this, but it's really helpful for me. I think of Beekley and my mind goes right to the mammo spots, right? I think when we were doing the prep call I shared with you when I was in Stamford, Connecticut, I'll never forget the day I got a call from the folks at the loading dock, and they were like, "So a truck just arrived filled with boxes for you," and we were like, "Okay," and they're like, "You bought enough Beekley spots for basically all of New England." So what happened is we had, as somebody accidentally put an extra zero in our order. And amazingly, the Beekley folks, I think, picked up on it as well. They were calling us too. They were sort of like, "Are you sure?" But it was already after the truck was in the loading docks. And it was a really funny story because we went down and said, "You know what? We could pawn these off. Maybe we sell them at resale." We were just joking the whole day about it. But all kidding aside, I think it's interesting to hear when you mentioned all the different product lines. I still would say, and I'm trying to get my hands around, like, so where is Beekley's sweet spot, right? And you had mentioned the founder. I think you said Mason. I think his name is Mason. Yep.
Mason Beekley.
And he said, we're going to go into like in the world of the stuff around the lab and the slips they're doing. Then it was like you innovated to do things around mammo and markers, and you saw an opportunity there. Then you're mentioning the Eloquel, which I remember now from the annual meeting. That's the stuff that's in the vial. Smells really nice, different aromas, right?
It's an adhesive. It's like the adhesive patch. It goes onto the patient's gown. You tear out the scent strip. It exposes it. And then it's nice because it's passive inhalation. They don't have to be holding something by their nose, and they don't have to, have a diffuser in the room that they've got to be very close to. And hospitals diffusers aren't great because you got to add water to them. So unless someone's frequently remembering to change that water, you could have airborne bacteria now that's diffusing into the room. So it's a really great product for healthcare.
Well, it's funny. I remember because I first saw it, I remember walking by the booth and someone said, "Hey, you have it." I thought it was just take it with you. And, all right. I didn't appreciate what you're talking about, what the actual efficacy was and what it did to help, or adding the calming or just a different scent there. There was a reason behind it. And maybe you can expound upon that even a little more. Because I think it's just interesting because it's a broad spectrum, right, of different things you guys are working on and finding ways to innovate. I find it really interesting, right? Because someone said to me, explain what Beekley offers. My mind now goes to like, I'm thinking like, well, they innovate and they have a lot of really unique offerings, but I don't know. I don't know if there's anything else I want to add to that, but I think it's really helpful for me to hear it all. And I think the story is kind of quite fascinating, how you're sort of branching out.
Absolutely. I mean, I think what we look for at Beekley, right, is single-use, niche disposable products that solve a significant problem, And for me, when we have a lot of submissions come into the pipeline, and a lot of folks reach out to us with product ideas, and I'd say in today's day and age, what I like to look for is I like to ask myself kind of three questions, right? And I like to say, does this product save time? Does it reduce cost? And does it increase patient throughput? If it does one of those three things, I'm like, okay, there's something there. If it does all of those three things, I'm going to prioritize that very heavy. But I think, we are at a time where hospitals are incredibly budget conscious. They have to be. There are folks that in healthcare are certainly overworked, understaffed. So anything we can do to make their job easier, increase patient care at the same time, and help reduce cost, all of that is going to be a tremendous value to the hospital. So that's what we've got to look at. There's a lot of, we can make a lot of cool things, but if it's not going to deliver significant value to the hospital, it's going to be very hard for it to be adopted. So we have to, and I think a big part of that is really understanding, what makes, what is important to your customers at this point, and you have to have a lot of those conversations with a lot of different people in healthcare to really understand what's on their mind. Like when they go to work every day, like what are their challenges? What are the things they could say like, hey, if I was to able to alleviate this from my daily responsibility, my job satisfaction is going to go up. I'm going to want to stay at this institution because they have something like this, or they've implemented a product like this.
That's right. And I love, by the way, that you hit on a lot of things there, but I like the categories that save time, reduce costs, throughput. So on the other side, so when I was overseeing imaging and lab at a big health system, every year when capital would come around, our questions were, first, is there a regulatory compliance thing? Do we have to change something, right? Secondly was, would it reduce costs and what it was going to add value, ROI to us? Right? Could we look at that? Third was it going to be better for the patient? Better quality, better images, better experience. Fourth might have been, again, not in any order, but fourth would have been the staff workflows. It was easier for them, better ergodynamics, better workflows. So you hit on all those same categories. And just, that's a lot of how the health systems, as that's how they're evaluating where will we spend the capital, where do these things hit. hits all of them, you're cruising, right? Hits a couple,
Absolutely.
it just depends that tied to the strategic directives of the organization of those things. So I like that because it sounds like you are hearing and understanding what these folks are facing every day. And I know that, the members of AHRA, as well as other people in the medical imaging space specifically, now with a shortage and, shortage both of technologists, some of their staff coming in, some of the radiologists, they're looking at every other way to do that. And they're looking a way to not be commoditized. Because more and more you'll see, where'd you go for imaging? Well, I go to the low cost, first place I can get into. Nothing wrong with that. But I'm also saying, well, hang on. How do I differentiate myself in a market where these little ones are popping up that are taking my outpatients or doing things differently that are there? Obviously, it comes through that patient experience and the ease of getting in and all of those things, but having all these little elements behind it to make your job easier and retain staff and maybe even attract staff and might say, well, that seems awesome. Look how innovative they are. They're using some new technology that I don't see other places. So I was thinking about this in this vein. So do you have any examples now of going back to your innovation framework of like any organizations you worked with where you particularly, you personally, or can speak to something where they went in, they talked to someone said, hey, we got an idea on something. You actually took that to fruition. I'm just curious if there's something in your mind that jumps.
Several. Actually, Eloquil that we were just touching on is a very interesting story. So we actually had a sonographer come to us and she had a great idea to create an aromatherapy ultrasound gel. And that's really where actually Eloquil started. So we were like, okay, that's really interesting. We can help like relax people during an ultrasound, create a calming kind of spa-like environment. And we did manufacture the product, but it's really hard to use essential oils inside ultrasound gel because of how much of it's being dispersed in the room. And this was also back in the day where like everyone was tapping off big blocks, and putting it into the bottles. So like if you open that block, you are really exposing the room to quite a bit of essential oil. So it was very hard to control it. And that was one of the issues we ran into when we first innovated it as a gel. But we had great reception to it. We just realized that the gel form was probably not the best way to go with aromatherapy because of a lack of control. So what we did is we worked with the inventor to say, the gel is probably not going to work, but we think you're onto something here. Like there is a place in healthcare for aromatherapy. And that's where we worked with the inventor to sort of take her initial idea of an aromatherapy gel and turn it into an Eloquil aroma tab that went onto the patient's gown. And it did a lot of things that the gel couldn't do. We were able to control the amount of scent that's emitted. There's a max and a min scent tear strip. So it gives them the power to say, no, I really want the full amount, or I just want a little bit, because everyone has a different sensitivity to smell. It also allowed for it to be controlled in the sense that it stayed with the patient. It didn't make the room smell a certain way where the person during treatment loved it. The next patient comes in and is like, I can't be in this room. I don't really like the smell of this,
Right,
So it's more
right.
personalized. It stayed with the patient and it also continuously worked. It wasn't something that they had to hold in their hand. It was only working when the gel was being used in the room. This is now on them for 6 to 8 hours and they are getting the benefits that full amount of time. So that's, one example of where we've worked with, a clinician who had an idea and the idea actually transformed into where it initially started. But ultimately it ended up being a very, very successful product. The other one that comes to mind for me is our Breeza products. We had a radiologist come to us. One of the ones that comes to mind for me specifically is our Breeza for small bowel distension. And the reason that I really love that product because it's so incredibly innovative. And the radiologist that had developed this was just very, very smart in his approach. Because what he recognized is no one wants to do enterography exams. They're miserable. It's like you have people coming in who probably have a small bowel disease, most likely. They could have Crohn's, ulcerative colitis. That's probably why they're either monitoring this and having it tracked or about to get diagnosed. So they may not feel that great to begin with. The only way to do an enterography is to fully distend the bowel. And the only way to fully distend the bowel is basically to drink a whole lot of something, like contrast. And what was available at the time was not very palatable. So we were hearing horror stories of, basically there was no good answer here. The horror stories is techs were having to work overtime. They were staying later than expected because they had to spend time out in the waiting room coaching patients to drink the compliance. Usually you got to like chug 2 bottles and sip the third one. So it's quite a bit you're loading in there.
Yeah.
And, they had people throwing up. They're cleaning that up now in the waiting room. Then you have patients who simply cannot drink to that compliance. So now the doctor's left in a bad spot because it's like, what do I do? Do I cancel this exam today? Loss of revenue for the hospital. If I cancel the exam, do I scan with what's on board and hope I get an adequate image? If I don't, I'm going to have to reimage this patient. Insurance probably is not going to cover the reimage of it. And now I'm dosing
and then do the prep all over again.
And do the prep all over again. And it's a double dose, right? So you're giving somebody a second dose of CT, which is, not small, or insignificant. So, in that regard, it just was a very difficult exam for a lot of people. And he said, I have a way to make this better. And he created a formulation that removed any kind of pharmaceutical from it. The beverage tasted like a flat Sprite or 7-Up. We just recently line extended it into a mixed berry, which is like really good. I really like the taste of that one. And they use the same protocol. They do still have to drink the same amount because you have to drink something to distend the bowel, but it's so much more palatable. The image quality is comparable to anything else. It's certainly improved against any kind of makeshift you would use like water or milk. So you get really nice bowel distension, lumen visualization, and it's great for the patient. Like when we started this, we surveyed their patients, especially ones who have gone through this exam before using a different product. And the patient satisfaction scores we were getting, back from these surveys were just outstanding. I mean, there was a night and day difference. So we were really able to convert a lot of the country over to, using this product. And now, we are certainly the market share leader in that space in enterography. And we're seeing more enterographies being done, and I'm not sure if that's just a trend or if it's because, we've offered something we offered a solution that made it easier for folks to do this. And now they don't shy away from it because we've solved some of those problems for them.
That's right. I'm still fascinated. I like that they were going from I'm saying aromatherapy with something with that to calm you with the smells to something now that you're ingesting to help it taste a little better and more palatable for people to have to the exams done to the markers. Like it's a really broad base. Like I'm glad we're having the conversation. I never appreciated kind of all these different elements, right? I always thought, like I told you, of the spots, Beekley spots.
Absolutely. I think that's what we're best known for is the spots. They've been around forever. It's kind of that's the golden standard for what you're going to mark with in mammography. But we have innovated into, a lot of other really cool areas and have, some really meaningful products there.
Yeah, I'm loving that. And that's great. 'Cause I think at the end of the day, what I'm hoping the listeners take and that, we try to encourage both as AHRA and just other, leaders that were in the medical imaging field is it is hard out there, right? But the only way we're going to go forward is to constantly take a look. Can we do things differently, right? Yes, you're going to do things with less. That's kind of the cliche thing. And I'm not trying to minimize that, but
sure.
Okay. So what does that mean? How do we, like you said before, how do we get more efficient? How do we make sure we're always safe? Safety's always got to be first, right? Both for the staff and the patient, right? And how to make sure we're giving image quality and just service to the people that are there. So do you have any thoughts there, or advice you would give to the folks that are listening, the frontline leaders, the administrators that are out there? And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be tied to you at Beekley, just in general about where you create that culture and how you start to think outside the box when all you want to do every day is just sort of, you're putting fires out, right? So
absolutely.
When do I have time to innovate, right?
I think you just hit the nail on the head. So that is literally the biggest challenge that I see in healthcare today, right? In my opinion, frontline workers are some of the best innovators in healthcare. They are the ones creating these makeshift solutions. They're the ones observing these problems, but they don't have time carved out in their schedule to innovate. MSK is doing a program now where they are allowing nurses to carve out innovation time. And I love this idea that they're really pushing nurses to innovate, at MSK. I think it's a brilliant idea. And I think, nurses see so much and they just observe so much, but they're, like, to your point, they are putting out fires nonstop. I mean, they are on their feet. It is one thing to the next. So they really don't have enough time. And I think that is more of a global problem that I think we've got to find a way to solve kind of through the healthcare continuum of how we create some space for folks in healthcare to have time to innovate, to talk and to say, I have a great idea to solve a problem. What do I do next? We've got to create an infrastructure for them to do so. And I think on the medical device side, this is where we really need to partner closely with our healthcare partners and institutions. We've got to be in contact with them. This is kind of a two-way street, right? It's not that we just want to sell you medical devices. We want you to tell us what your problems are so we can help solve them, you know? So I think having that open dialogue between medical device companies and healthcare institutions is incredibly important. And whether you're doing that through voice of the customer interviews, surveys, focus groups, or just reaching out to contacts that you've made in the industry and saying, hey, I know we haven't chatted in a while. Tell me what's going on in your department. Like, what challenges are you facing right now? You know, more open dialogue, I think, between medical device and the healthcare institutions is going to serve everybody well, because we'll be able to solve greater problems together.
Yeah. I love that we have that. I love that that's now recorded. I love that's going to be out there in the ether, because I couldn't have said it any better. I'm going to echo some of these things. I think about this is why, I came back to this role at AHRA, and I think why we're here is we are trying to create those opportunities for our members, and even the folks that are out there that aren't members and may consider that, to how do you network? How do you connect? How do you share your ideas? How do you commiserate and create opportunities to meet with people like you, meet with our corporate partners, have the conversation, take a few minutes and just listen to what they're working on or what they might be coming up with, and then give them your thoughts about why that either works, why you're interested, or why I wish you would just go right or turn left, right? And we're trying to create these opportunities for those things. I mean, I can shamelessly plug, to go have people listen to our webinars, listen to the podcasts, go to the annual meeting that's coming up in a few months in July, right? So anybody that's out there, Absolutely. If you go to AHRA.org, there's a lot of information about how to register and log in. I know you'll be there. So like, you guys have a booth that's there. I also know, and we mentioned this earlier, is Beekley offers 5 scholarships for people to actually go to the annual meeting. So you cover the cost of their registration, their flights, the hotel, which is amazing, because we know now to get to someplace in person, hospitals are tighter on those budgets, and it's a outlay of your own cost. But the general takeaway here, what I'm driving at is, for those out there, is if you can find the time to just, from your own office, read articles, listen to webinars, go to the podcast, great. Then if you can carve out the time and get approval to go to an actual meeting and meet people in person, go there, because it is worth gold, right? Or the opportunity 100%. To walk real quick, you walk the exhibit hall when we have the exhibit hours, which we call the gathering place, purposely because exhibit hall denotes to me we are pushing product. Gathering hall to me denotes we're developing relationships, we're having back and forth, it's an iterative dialogue, and like what you drove at is just go stand by a booth and be like, what do you do? Or here's what I'm dealing with. Can you help me? Because maybe you never know. Someone might say yes. What I'm hearing you guys say is everybody come to the booth, right? Come Absolutely. Talk to me and tell me what you're dealing with, right?
Yeah, that's what we want to know. And I think, sometimes I think we all get so busy in our jobs, right? And especially in healthcare, that is a job where you don't have much free time at all. You really are on the go from beginning and end of shift. So I think what I think is sometimes it's intimidating to say like, well, I just don't have the time to make a new product. I have this great idea, but I don't have the time to do this. And in reality, with us, like, I don't know how every other company works, but I can say at Beekley, like, you can be as involved as you want to be, or you can be not involved, and it's very easy to come and say, listen, I have this idea. I'd like to work with you guys on this idea. I don't have time to do this. And that's where we can say, okay, you have a great idea. We would love to commercialize it. We would perform market research on it first to make sure it is commercially viable and that Beekley is going to be the best partner to you. Because if we're not going to be the best folks to sell this, what we like to do is say, this is not the best product for Beekley, but we'll recommend who else you can bring this product to, And I think, but the benefit there is that it isn't like it is such a massive amount of time, because it's like a conversation with Beekley. We understand, what you're trying to do, what your product is, what you're going to solve. We can go out there and make it, commercialize it, and essentially you're going to get a royalty from the sales that we get off the product. So it's kind of nice. I like to call it mailbox money, because it's like, you're out there doing your job. You had a great idea. You passed it along to a medical device company, and you're going to get residuals from that for quite a long time, especially if it's patentable, So it's a really nice kind of additional revenue stream that's available to healthcare professionals, and it's not a scary process. It actually could be relatively simple.
Yeah. Oh, I hadn't even thought about that piece. That's a whole nother incentive to get out there and do that. I was going to say, even, I would imagine sometimes people just come and have an idea and you say, you know what, maybe it's not a source of product, but because you're in so many places around the country, around the world, you can say, I had 3 people, like I said earlier, hold on a second, I'm going to put you in touch with folks. I think that's what I used to get, to throw me sometimes. I used to bring vendors all the time to my organization. And oftentimes my team's like, why are we looking at so-and-so? Like, we're not looking to buy anything. Or I'm like, yeah, I know we don't have the dollars right now. I know we're not looking to change, but why not listen? Because maybe we'll hear something that we could bring back to another partner. Or maybe we'll say, you know what, they're there in the day, the rainy day, when something comes up. We're like, you know what, where did we meet that company that did X, Y, and Z? But I think the biggest one always was, I love talking to the corporate partners because you had someone else who was dealing with what I was dealing with. Probably, you know what, my team would always say, we're very unique. I'm like, I wish we were that unique. Trust me, the same issues we're seeing are happening somewhere else. And you guys are an unbelievable link to connect with other people. As much about the product, you might say product, yes, we can work on that together. But in the immediate moment, let's just get you in touch with 4 of the people that are dealing with that, because that's where real value, I think, starts to come in, when it's not always buy my product, sell the product. It's just that relationship building. I think you mentioned early on, which that's the biggest thing I circled when I was making my notes that I took away from here.
Oh, it's crucial. I mean, the relationships are really what drive this. And it really is a two-way street. It isn't, a medical device company will fail, I think, every single time if you stay inside the walls of your institution, you don't get out, and you make assumptions about what people need in healthcare, and then you create products like that. You have to get out of the building, and you have to have open dialogue, and you've really got to have good relationships where people trust you. They're willing to talk to you about these types of things. I think establishing trust is a huge part of this. And then I feel like once you've established trust and you've developed those relationships, it's very easy to have these types of conversations like, what are your biggest challenges, you know? And a lot of times it might be like, my biggest challenge is my budget. They're making me cut my budget, you know? And then it's like, okay, you can dig into that a little bit and understand like, well, what is on your mind? What are you looking to cut out of that budget, you know? And when you start to understand like, oh, well, I see they're cutting, you know, this, you know, certain consumable out of their budget because it's grossly expensive. Is there a way to create something that would be more cost effective for them, but still not jeopardize clinical care, patient satisfaction? It's not going to take the staff more time to use. It's just as simple. And that's really, I think, where it comes in is you look at some of those competing devices, right? You don't always have to be new to the world. You might be able to do something a different way and still achieve the same level of success. And you kind of look at what's out there and you say, okay, this is what's good about the other product, right? And that's where we say, okay, that's where our need for parity comes in. We've got to be as good as that product in these areas. But what are our key differentiators? What's going to make us stand out, and what's going to make us say, we're as good as this, but these key differentiators are what bring us to a different level. And that's what's going to make you want to switch. But you'll never know your key differentiators unless you have open dialogue, relationships, and conversation.
That's right. And I think also I infer from you there too is it's okay to take some risks sometimes and try something, and it might fail. Like you mentioned, you guys had an idea on a product at the Eloquil, which was one whole direction, and you realize, you know what, this isn't going to work. It's not going to work for a variety of reasons. We're going to pivot, and now it's going to look a little bit different, but the overall reasoning behind it to provide, I think you said that to make it a little more calm for people and make them feel more comfortable, you still hit on that, right? So I think some people understand that perfect gets in the way of just getting moving.
It does. We like to say, you know, don't let great get in the way of good, right? Because
that's right.
And I think it's a great point, because I think sometimes if you're just striving for perfection out of the gate, you could drive yourself crazy iterating, you know, and you've really got to, I think, understand what's going to move the needle there.
Yeah. All right. This has been great. I mean, we could go on all afternoon. And like I said, next time on the golf course together.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Right. At the end of the day, so if the listeners wanted to get a hold of you, they want to find more information about Beekley, what are some, you want to throw out some ideas that we'll make sure we put it in the summary that's out there as well, but just want to share the best way to reach you or find out some information about that.
Yeah, the best way to reach me, you can email me directly. My email is McGuire, McGuire @Beekley.com. You could send an email to newproducts@Beekley.com. That will go to my entire product development team. Or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Feel free to find me on LinkedIn, connect, shoot me a message. Any of those ways are good ways to connect, and would love to just have open dialogue.
I love it. Well, Mike, thank you so much for taking time today. I'm excited. You got my mind spinning about innovation. And I think more importantly, taking time to think about opportunities for that, or where I need to think differently. My team needs to think differently. Hopefully the listeners got a little inspiration from you today as well. So I really appreciate it. Thank you to Beekley for your support, longstanding support. I'm so excited to have you at the annual meeting. I know we have a ton of people applying for your scholarships. and they couldn't be more thankful because you're going to get a bunch of folks to be able to travel that otherwise couldn't. So looking forward to seeing you.
Absolutely. Thank you. This was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed it and really appreciate the partnership between us and AHRA. It's certainly very meaningful to us.
Thanks for listening to Medical Imaging Matters, a podcast from AHRA, the Association for Medical Imaging Management. If you have enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. AHRA is proud to be the trusted association for medical imaging management professionals, offering career development programs, a comprehensive selection of educational conferences and seminars, networking opportunities, award-winning publications, the certified radiology CRA credential, and so much more. To discover all AHRA has to offer, visit our website at ahra.org. Until next time.